"Hey, Marty!" A man named Jonathan Phillips called to his 6-year-old son, who came sprinting across the front lawn. "Daddy!" The young boy roared happily as he leaped towards his 6-foot-tall father and was caught at the last second. The two shared a loving embrace before Jonathan set his son down and admired just how much his son was growing up. "Sometimes I can't believe you're 8 years old, Marty," the father said with a smile. "You're getting old on me, kid." Jonathan had just gotten home from working at a local auto repair shop. His second and primary occupation was an engineer. He worked for a company that pursued all sorts of technological dreams, including being able to fully interpret one's dreams and view them like a television show. In his spare time, Jonathan tinkered and messed around with his own aspirations for invention. His basement and garage were fully dedicated to these outside-of-work hobbies. He held strong beliefs that one's imagination was her true inventive limit. He often invited his son, Martin, to join him. But as curious as the boy was about the unknown, he was just too timid and easily frightened, preventing him from exploring anything. The young boy was handsome, much like his father, with dark hair, light skin, and a strong pair of eyes. Yet the boy could never work up the confidence to talk to other children. Jonathan had faith in his son and believed that the child would find a way out of his shell eventually. Until then, he would do his best to find a balance between being a single father and Martin's best friend. The year was 1975, and Jonathan was high on the life that he was leading. Despite the Cold War having taken a turn for the worst between the United States and the Soviet Union, Jonathan was still able to find happiness. But although he was happy, there were hundreds of men dying every day in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The Soviet Union had invaded all 3 countries in March during spring break weekend, pushing American forces out of Southeastern Asia in merely 4 days. Tension continued to rise as the days went by, and American leaders, both political and military, were desperate to stop communism in Asia. President Nixon had vowed retaliation, but the American people were riddled with anxiety. Internal problems at home were also wearing the nation thin, creating many different sides that wanted to get rid of different ideals. This made it hard for Martin to walk to school, as he usually had to walk through several different city blocks that were occupied by loud and aggressive protesters. "How was school today, son?" Jonathan asked, and Martin held his head low and tried to avoid eye contact with his father. "They did it again," Martin said in a shrill tone, and Jonathan frowned, lowering himself to his son's level. "Another painting?" the engineer asked his son, and Martin nodded. "They punched and kicked holes right through it, and then spray painted over the pieces." The boy answered, and he buried his head in his father's chest. "It's okay, son," Jonathan told him, hugging the child tight before promising, "I'll talk to the principal in the morning and tomorrow will be better." But tomorrow wasn't better. Nothing would be better after tomorrow. Jonathan got called into his engineer job the following morning, much earlier than the principal would have taken a phone call. He didn't say what it was, but it seemed urgent enough for him to leave in a rush. He barely woke his son, told him the situation, and hugged him goodbye. The boy got himself fed, cleaned, and dressed for school. He was an especially efficient child, more so than his father could know. Martin began the walk towards school with a pit in his stomach, one that seemed to have no bottom and was full of anxiety. He was wearing a winter cap over his semi-long hair, along with a Beatles t-shirt and jeans. His matching Beatles book bag hung onto his back as he walked and listened to the innocent songs of nearby birds. It was on the walk to school that Martin noticed there was a man following him. Even for a 6-year-old, the boy was incredibly aware of his surroundings. It was as if Martin could feel the man's presence as he trailed the boy all the way to school, stopping just short of the property near a bus stop. It was here that he simply stared at Martin as the boy uneasily entered the school building across the street. Martin marched down the hallway towards his classroom, unable to get the face of the strange man out of his head. He sat at his desk all day long, tapping his pencil on the wooden desk and occasionally glancing outside, terrified that he would see the man standing beneath a tree. But the man never showed and seemed to be gone, unless he was still somehow standing at the bus stop. If he were, would he follow Martin home? The boy cringed and even leaned into his seat to try and hide himself. His stomach churned as he thought about what would happen at the end of the day, when he stepped outside and saw that the man was either gone or still there. Should he tell a teacher? The principal, maybe? "Martin," a stern, feminine voice spoke, and the giggles of several children followed. The teacher, Miss Levitt, was attempting to pull the boy out from his own head. She could see that something was distracting him. "Yes?" Martin murmured, and the teacher tilted her head. "Have you been following the story?" Martin glanced down at his desk to see that his book, a collection of short stories, was not even open. Everyone else had theirs open and were following along as Miss Levitt read. "No," the boy answered honestly, and a few more kids laughed. Miss Levitt frowned, and the interruption stopped when she raised a hand. She returned her attention to Martin and told him which story and page that they were on. The boy opened his book, and the teacher sat back down at her desk. She began reading once more, and Martin did his best to follow along. But his anxiety was not going to go away. No amount of words or imagination was going to fix that. There was a man outside the school with great intent aimed at the boy. He could feel it in his bones. "Martin!" the teacher exclaimed as she noticed that Martin had trailed off again and was gawking outside the window while trapped within his own mind. The class laughed, and Martin snapped out of it, returning to his book. Much later, Martin sat at his desk while excited chatter filled the room around him. In just a handful of minutes, the bell would ring, signifying the end of the school day. The students were rowdy and more than ready to jump up and leave the classroom. Miss Levitt sat at her desk, looking over her lesson plans for the following day, when an odd sound began to blare. It sounded off everywhere, especially outside, as the source of the noise could not be determined. But the teacher's eyes widened as she instantly realized what was going on. "Oh no!" she cried, covering her mouth as her eyes clamped shut for a moment. She was on the verge of a meltdown. Martin recognized the sound right away and understood his teacher's response as well. These were the warnings of a nuclear attack, something that his class had begun preparing for many years ago. He was surprised that many of his fellow classmates did not know what the sound was, as they continued to ask one another about it. Some noticed the teacher's terrified reaction and were also growing quite nervous and fearful, although they seemed to still not fully grasp the situation. "Okay, class," Miss Levitt managed to murmur as she opened her eyes and wiped her tearful face. However, Martin had been given different instructions by his father, who held a full grasp on nuclear weapons and how they worked. Jonathan understood quite well that hiding beneath one's desk was just a peaceful hope given in one's last moments. Martin jumped to his feet and dashed towards the door, ignoring the pleas of Miss Levitt as she reached out and called for him to stop. But the boy kept going, opening the classroom door and running out into the hallway. His teacher didn't dare not follow, as she opted to stay with the rest of the children that were to be her final responsibility. Every classroom was filled with children and teachers hiding beneath their desks, most of them not believing that they would live. Martin was frantically crying and acting out his character, only due to overwhelming fear and anxiety. Had the Soviet Union finally decided to attack the United States and spark another world war? That was a question that a young boy should not have to ask himself, but he did anyways. It would be the first of many questions that would shape the crude scientist he would one day become. Today, however, he charged down the hallway towards the corner, where he turned and nearly ran into a large figure. He bumped his face and shoulder against the midsection of a tall man one who was wearing a black suit and tie, and his gray eyes appeared to be hollow or void of a soul. He was bald and had a tan as well as a dirty blonde beard. It was the man from outside. The man who had been following Martin since he left home this morning. You, Martin mumbled, stepping back as he looked the man up and down, trembling as tears began to run down his face. The sirens were still going off, but somehow they no longer filled the boy's ears as he was transfixed on the specific moment in time. "Come with me," the man ordered, and when he reached outward for the boy's wrist, Martin shrieked and ran away in the same direction he had just come from. The man immediately followed, cursing the child as he hurried after him. Martin screamed out for help, praying that another adult would exit a classroom and come to his aid. With his longer legs, the man would soon reach the boy and it would be over. Unfortunately, the bomb sirens outside, as well as those in the school, were enough to drown out Martin's cry for help. The boy made another turn and found the back exit of the school, which led to the playground used for recess. Martin pushed through the doors and nearly tripped over himself on his way out. Luckily, a strong pair of hands caught him, and a sigh of relief came from both him and the person who had caught him. "Thank goodness," a familiar voice said, and the boy looked up to see his father, Jonathan. He had left work in a rush, desperate to get to his son before the nuke struck. "Dad?" Martin murmured, and his relief was short-lived. The man crashed through the double doors and shoved Martin to the ground, reaching for his father afterward. Jonathan wrestled with the man for a moment as Martin lay on the ground, woozy from hitting his head on the pavement. The boy touched the back of his skull and saw blood on his palm when he pulled it away for a look. He shuddered and looked to the sky, unable to see a nuke coming, but that didn't mean it wasn't. Martin got back up and shouted at the man to leave his father alone. Sadly, he wasn't the type to go rushing in and save his father, despite how badly he wanted to. "Leave him alone!" the boy cried. "Dad!" The doors opened once more, and Mr. N, the gym teacher, came outside. He preferred to be called Mr. N due to students having difficulty pronouncing his German last name. The dark-haired gym instructor frowned when he saw the boy, and then looked to the pair of men struggling with one another. "Help my dad!" Martin pleaded, and Mr. N rushed to Jonathan's aid, quickly pulling the other man off of him. However, before he could get a good grip or punch the attacker, Mr. N was struck with a knife as the man quickly turned around. "No!" Martin screeched, and Mr. N fell to his knees, his eyes wide and his lips trembling before the man slit his throat. Martin had never seen anyone die before, not until today at least. "You're coming with me," the man growled as he turned back towards Jonathan, who had produced a small handgun and aimed the barrel at his head. Half a moment later he fired, and the bald, murderous stranger collapsed dead at Jonathan's feet. Now Martin had seen 2 people die, and in less than 60 seconds. Would he have to watch everyone else die in a few minutes too? "There will only be more of them," Jonathan said to his son, who was shaking like a starved, frozen animal in the dead of winter. The father reached for his son, and the boy stepped back, unable to grasp anything that was happening. "We have to go!" Jonathan urged his son, and for the first time, Martin believed that his father was afraid. "They will only send more people after us. We have to go now." "Where do we go?" the boy asked, throwing his hands down. "You said the bomb would kill everyone." Jonathan reached for his son once more and begged, "Come here, son. Please." Martin gulped and offered his father a hand, in which Jonathan quickly responded by placing a device over his son's wrist. The boy tried to pull away out of instinct, but it was too late. Jonathan had strapped a wristwatch to Martin's left wrist, and when the boy looked at him with a puzzled look, he smiled, producing his own. The boy's father began to turn the hands on his own, and Martin clenched his eyes shut for a moment, overwhelmed by everything that was happening. A moment later, Jonathan tinkered with Martin's watch, still smiling as he did so. What could he possibly be so happy about? "What are you doing?" Martin asked in a rushed, panic-stricken tone. "Shouldn't we be trying to get home to the bunker?" "It's too late, son," Jonathan said proudly as he pointed to the sky. Martin glanced up to see the nuke closing in fast, throwing itself towards an entire city of people. "I'm scared, Dad," Martin cried, and Jonathan quickly embraced his son, holding him tight. "It's okay, Marty," Jonathan reassured him. "This world is doomed, but you and I are not." Before Martin could ask his father what that meant, the two of them instantly became weightless, and somehow, some way, they vanished. The nuke struck about 3 miles from the school, annihilating everyone and everything in its path for dozens upon dozens of miles. Martin later awoke in a grassy field with a blue, healthy sky hanging over him. He would later learn that he was in Kansas, a place that he would call home for decades to come. The last thing he remembered was leaving the school with his father, somehow disappearing before the nuclear blast could kill them, along with everyone else. His head was groggy, and his ears rang, but otherwise he seemed to be okay. There were voices nearby as an older couple was approaching, asking the boy if he was okay and where his parents were. The boy's eyes widened with horror as he looked around to see no sign of his father.